our adventure at Smoke Dumper, the Japanese incendiary bomb, all that was left out of history, you know. We didn't storm the hill. We didn't do any of that, but what we did should have been somewhere, should have been mentioned. They just don't know. And I think they should know.
Absolutely.
I was in the first all-colored parachute unit. In December of 1943, the Army activated a colored parachute unit, and it was designated the 555 Parachute Infantry Company. And the Army at that time were offering a one-year service to anyone who wanted to volunteer for a year. That was a godsend for me because it allowed me to do something other than sit around all day. So I volunteered. I was called in, and they showed me a list, and the list included a service company of the parachute school. The parachute school kind of intrigued me, and I chose that. Well, the service company for the parachute school was a company made up of all colored troops. I use the phrase colored because in the 40s we were designated as colored. And this service company had a white officer and all colored soldiers. And our sole function as a service company was to do guard duty for the parachute school and its properties. We as colored soldiers in Fort Benning, Georgia in 1941 and 42 could not go into the main post exchange. But when we passed the main post exchange and we could look in, we could see the German and Italian prisoners of war sitting down at the same table with the white soldiers, drinking cokes and smoking and having a good time. So it's understandable how colored soldiers would have an inferiority complex. There must be something wrong with us. We're in uniform, but we're not good enough to sit at the table with the prisoners of war. I took it upon myself to put in the operation a scheme to raise the morale of the men. Every day, the white students would go through their training, push-up, jumping off of a 5-foot platform, coming out of a mock-up fuselage of a C-47 plane. So we watched them day in, day out, and we knew the routine. So it occurred to me that if I could get my men to go through the same calisthenics as the whites do, it might inspire them. So one day, I gathered all of our men with the help of the NCOs, and we double-timed the men to the field. And we assigned them to each post. Some were doing push-ups, some were jumping off the platform, and then there's another group learning how to come out of the C-47 plane. And an amazing thing happened, because after a week or two of that type of regiment, I could notice a distinct improvement in their appearance. Their clothes were crisp. When you talk to them, they look you straight in the eye, and they begin to act like soldiers rather than servants. And that was very heartwarming to me. And it was one day during our exercise that the commanding general of the parachute school, General Gaither, was on his way back to his office one day, and he looked across at what should have been an empty calisthenic field. And he saw about 50 colored soldiers running up and down, shouting 1,000, 2,000. He told his chauffeur to stop, and he observed this for a while. And he went back to his office and told his aide to get in touch with that first sergeant and have him in my office tomorrow morning at 9 o'clock. And the next morning, they ushered me in, and I saluted, and he returned the salute, and he said, well, explain to me what I saw. And I did. And he was impressed. And he said, this is a good move you made, but now let me tell you a secret, Morris. In a few weeks, the Army is going to direct me to activate a 555 parachute company, all colored, officers and men. And would you like to be the first sergeant of that company? And I said, oh. And going back to my office, I have, to this day, no idea how I got back. My head was on the cloud. I might have flown back. I might have taken wings. In December of 1943, orders came down activating a 555 parachute company, and Walter Morris, first sergeant of that company.
The physical conditioning is just as tough as ever. Makes you wonder whether you really want to be a paratrooper.
Some of you will not have the stamina or the endurance to complete the course. This we know beforehand. Those that do complete the course, we feel, will uphold the high standards of airborne service.
20 of us started classes in January, and we went through the course. They selected one of the instructors who volunteered, because most of them did not want to be associated with us. So we jumped 4 days, and then the 5th jump was at night. And once you jump at night, jump the following morning, you would graduate, because now you're a paratrooper. You're excited and you're nervous for every jump, but it's a wonderful feeling when you jump out of a plane. You get that, once the chute opens, then you're up there and it's quiet. And, it's a wonderful experience. A lot of the guys say, you're on a high because you're looking down and the whole planet is yours. And once that was done, and once the officers finished that course, and the Army opened the gates for all colored soldiers who wanted to volunteer, and they came by the hundreds. And we set up our headquarters, and we start functioning.
All over the world, the United States Army is on the alert to defend our country, you, the American people, against aggression.
The Army at that time decided that we were going to be sent overseas. We were going to help, we were going to fight. And then the war ended in Europe. So we said, okay, we've got General MacArthur still there. We can go to the Pacific. And sure enough, one day orders came ordering us to report to Camp Pendleton, Oregon. We said, well, this is it. We're on our way to the Pacific. Little did we know that the Forest Service arm of the Agriculture Department was having difficulty in fighting forest fires. Some were started by campers not putting out that fire properly. Some were caused by lightning, and some were caused by the Japanese incendiary balloons.
This is one of the Japanese paper balloons, identified by the code name Paper. The unit carries up to 4 10-pound incendiaries and a central payload of about 60 pounds of incendiaries or anti-personnel HE bombs to drop on the west coast of the United States and Canada. It is then supposed to destroy itself. These units have been found in areas ranging from Alaska all the way south to the Mexican border.
That was a well-kept secret because the Army did not want the public nor the Japanese to know how effective those balloons were. And we were sent to Camp Pendleton as part of Operation Firefly. That was the code word for smoke jumper. And it was a letdown really to us because we thought we were going to fight the enemy. And here we were going to learn how to jump out of a plane and land in trees, which we were taught not to do, and fight a forest fire with picks and shovels.
In fighting forest fires, time is precious. Even the fastest combination of vehicle, horse, and foot travel permitted small fires to gain momentum and become conflagrations before they could be reached and controlled. Then in 1940 came the smoke jumpers. Now the firefighter has a chance in his race against time to corral the fast-moving fire demon.
We arrived in Camp McCall, and we were met by the Forest Service people. And one man particularly, Frank Derry, who was a Forest Service paratrooper, had designed a special chute for smoke jumpers. He was able to pinpoint his tree that he wanted to land in. And when you hit the tree, you maneuvered and came down the rope. It was called a LDR, a let-down rope. We had our LDRs, 50 feet up. By the way, that was how we lost the only casualty in that experience. He was coming down one of those tall pines, about 100 feet tall, and as he was coming down, he slipped and he fell. And we had over 33 individual fires that we jumped on, and we had over 1,200 individual jumps. And that was the only fatality we had.
One of the most famous units to which a new paratrooper can be assigned is the All-American 82nd Airborne Division. The men who served in it in World War II made this patch a symbol of good soldiering, courage, and determination.
When the war was over, the 555 came back from Pendleton and was transferred from McCall to Fort Bragg. General Gavin was the commanding general of the 82nd Airborne Division, where he came back to Fort Bragg, which was a home of the airborne. He went to Washington and asked the adjutant general, could he bring the 555 back on the main post and include them in his division. That had never been done. No one ever even given it a thought. This was integration. And this was a year before Truman put the letter of proclamation integrating the service. This was a year before, almost a year before that. So he came back to Fort Bragg, deactivated the 555, and he took our black officers and he took white officers and put them together. And white soldiers and black soldiers moved into the same barracks. Wow. And that was historic. They never did that. And there was not one incident of racism, not one. And they were all working together. We had a fine group of men, and they're all focused on the same thing, proving not only to themselves, but to the world, that colored troops were no different from white troops. If you had it, you had it, whether you were black, white, blue, or green, you know. And they were all dedicated to prove that proposition that all men are created equal.